Good day, everyone. So, for today's video, we will discuss adjusting journal entries. But before we start on the topic that we have prepared for this video, let me just give you a short recap of our previous discussions regarding basic accounting. So, we've learned at the very start of the class that there is a need for us to analyze transactions, whether transactions in the business are to be recorded or not. When we talk of transaction, we are referring to transactions that are relevant in the business, transactions that will affect our financial statements. So, in every business transaction, we have to identify first if this transaction is requiring us to record it in our journal. So we make the journal entry. After doing the journal entry, you do the posting. You post it in our ledger. And so on and so forth. There's a cycle in accounting that we need to follow. Now, before we complete the cycle, most especially on the part of preparing our financial statement, there is what we call the adjusting journal entries that we need to learn. Why? We need to learn how to record adjusting journal entries when we are about to prepare our financial statement. We cannot complete the FS if we do not know how to record AJE. So when do we record this? Prior to preparation of FS. The reason why there's a need to learn for AJE, because our adjusting journal entries will help us prepare the FS and reflect the accurate account balances. It will consider all unrecorded expenses and income prior to completing your financial statement. Now, there are 4 types of entries, classification of adjusting journal entries that we need to learn. We have accruals, deferrals, doubtful accounts, and depreciation. I know this is familiar to you, accruals. Accruals may either be income, relating to income or to expense. So, when we talk of accruing income, what does it mean? We record income or we recognize income when it is earned, regardless when we receive the payment from the customer. So, mo na itong gi-mention sa una nga kung ang customer mangutang. Okay. By the time nga ma-deliver na nato ang goods to our customer, we already have the right, as a matter of right, we can now record and recognize the transaction as part of our sales. Kung expense pod, accrual on expense, we recognize or we record expense when incurred regardless when paid. Sa kaning nga point of view, ikaw ang nangutang. Let's say, nangutang ka sa imong supplier. By the time you receive the goods you have ordered from the supplier, naanay katungod ang pikas mo recognize nga nakautang ka sa ila. And the same way, ikaw pod, you should have to recognize also your obligation to your supplier by recording the transaction. So regardless kano sa kanibayad, basta ni-arise ang obligation to pay, when you receive the goods, you should have to make a journal entry of which. And that falls under adjusting journal entries. Now, let's proceed to deferrals. Deferrals may either be referring to advance payment or advance collection. Advance payment, example would be your rentals. Diba? Usually, Lessors collect advance payment of rent. On your part, you actually have options or methods on how to recognize advance payment. Same goes with advance collection. You receive an advance payment from the customer. So, nakakollect ka from the customer, pero wala pa ka ni render og service or you have not delivered the goods yet. Remember the example ni Cardo o ni Aliana o ni Lola sa previous nato nga discussion. So, that was an example of advance collection. Third type is the doubtful account. This may be new to you. What is a doubtful account? Diba? We mentioned earlier, utang. Sa utang, posible mabayaran, posible dili mabayaran. Hence, there's a need to make an estimate or a provision for uncollectible accounts. So, munang mga utang nga wala mabayari for the longest time. And based on your experience in the business, ang utang nga moabot na og 3 years, utang sa imong customer nga dili mabayaran sa imuha, most likely dili na gyud ka bayaran. Kay siguro di na ikita ang utangan. So kinahanglan ta mo establish a provision. Provision is somehow an estimate based on experience, based on your exposure. Daghan kag i-consider ani para ang imuhang financial statement will reflect the accurate balances of accounts. Kay di ba, financial statement will help the stakeholders, the owners make a wise and sound economic decision. So when we talk of doubtful accounts, mao na nitong mga kinahanglan nato i-consider nga mga dawatunon nga wala nay kasiguruhan nga madawat. Lastly is our depreciation. Kung sa man si depreciation, it's an allocation of cost of an asset to expense. Familiar when a business acquires capital asset like equipment, like when you establish your own building, kanang mga assets with a useful life of more than a year, mo na sila ang mga subject to depreciation. Di man na to pwede, say for instance, you buy a laptop. A laptop doesn't just kanang serve the business for less than a year. Diba? Last man siya mga 3 years siguro, 5 years the most. So, it is inappropriate to recognize expense from the time nga imuha siyang gipalit. Kay magamit pa man nimo siya more than one accounting period. So, that's why there's a need to recognize depreciation expense for assets that are capital assets subject to it. Now, let's try to picture out how are we going to apply these types. So first, we have accruals. Sa accruals, I know this is not difficult on your part. Kay familiar naman mo sa mga accounts involved in recording accruals. So let's have first this accruals under income method. So I mean not method, under recognizing income. So income, how do we recognize income in accrual? You recognize income, record it when you earned it, regardless when you receive the payment from the customer. So mo na create ang account nga receivable. So since this is an asset, by the time nga mo recognize ka sa sales, when you deliver the goods to your customer, that's the time nga nanakay katungod to recognize income. So even if wala pa'y nadawat nga cash, you debit an asset account, accounts receivable, and recognize sales, credit sales. Or kung you are into renting, leasing of properties, kung ang imuhang lessee wala pa ni bayad pero nilapse na ang period nga naka-occupy na siya sa imong property, you are already entitled to recognize income using this asset account, rent receivable, and then credit rent income. Now, sa expense. Expense is recognized when incurred. The keyword is when incurred, regardless when paid. Kung kanus mo arise ang obligation to pay, you record the expense and ma-zero out lang na siya only when you pay for the obligation nga imong gi-recognize. So example, imong bills, utility bills sa imong company, electric bill. So, moabot na ang bill, you record utilities expense, debit, and then you credit, you recognize it already as a liability. Same goes with interest. Makitahay na kay nangutang ka from a third person and para sa imong business, and kana siya is naay interest even if wala pa kanibayad, but there was already a certain period nga nilapse na pertaining to your credit term, naa na siya interest. So you need to recognize it by journalizing this entry, interest expense, debit, and then you record liability, interest payable. In the next video, we will discuss deferrals. I know this is not that difficult to understand since you are already familiar with accruals. So let's have deferrals after this. Thank you.